For months, subtle tremors had whispered warnings across the high desert floor of eastern Utah, but no one had listened. The men at the ranch were too focused on the treasure rumors, the gold-laced ore samples, and the web of tunnels weaving beneath their boots. There was something deep underground, something older than the Spanish conquistadors, older even than the Ute legends etched into stone walls. Then the flood came. It didn't happen the way floods usually do. There had been no rain for weeks. The sky stayed bone-dry, sun-split, stretched in a blue dome overhead. Canyons shimmered in the heat, dust clung to the air, and dry winds whispered across the cracked clay like the breath of forgotten spirits. Yet, without a cloud in sight, Blind Frog Ranch drowned in water that seemed to rise from the ground itself. It began in the East Cavern, the one they had been excavating since spring. They dug down to expose a narrow shaft carved into bedrock, lined with mineralized stone unfamiliar to local geologists. The rock glistened as if slick with oil, though it remained dry to the touch. On the 44th day of digging, the crew hit a chamber. The moment the final slab was cleared, something shifted below. A hiss of air, cool and ancient, exhaled from the opening. The tunnel led downward at a steep angle, and from its dark throat came the unmistakable sound of running water, rushing, pulsing, alive. They hadn't drilled into a cavern. They'd tapped into a system. By dusk, water surged through the tunnel with unnatural force. It came not as a trickle, but as a torrent, clear and cold, surging with pressure no aquifer should hold. Within hours, the lower excavation pit was submerged. Tools floated like relics. Diesel drums bobbed along the rim of the trench. The men scrambled for higher ground as the water climbed steadily, relentless as time. Within a day, the entire southeast quadrant of the ranch was underwater. But this was no ordinary floodwater. It carried strange sediment, black silt that glittered like volcanic glass and bore a faint scent of cinnamon and sulfur. Floating among the debris were fragments of something carved, obsidian discs, stone figures, and shards of ceramic painted in blue and red spiral patterns. Symbols no one could read. The discovery drew researchers and looters alike. Helicopters thumped overhead, carrying archaeologists with heavy cameras and heavier doubts. What they found confounded them. Irrigation channels and water gates embedded in the sandstone beneath the ranch. Channels so symmetrical, so precise, that they seemed out of time. A subterranean network of sluices and cisterns engineered with an elegance matching Roman aqueducts. Only these weren't Roman. As ground-penetrating radar swept the area, an enormous structure was revealed, buried under centuries of sediment and stone. It stretched for nearly a mile beneath the western plateau, an engineered reservoir, flanked by curved retaining walls, and an array of radial spokes resembling spokes of a sunwheel. The construction bore symbols that matched Aztec codices, glyphs that hadn't been seen this far north before. The conclusion shocked even the skeptics. What lay beneath Blind Frog Ranch wasn't just a treasure site. It was the northern edge of an Aztec hydrological marvel, a forgotten arm of an ancient waterway system that had stretched from the Valley of Mexico all the way into Utah. The implications were staggering. Somehow, centuries ago, the Aztecs or their predecessors had engineered a system to move water across vast distances, possibly as a means of irrigation, ritual, or even to transport minerals like gold. The presence of volcanic silt hinted that the source of the water came from deeper still, perhaps from lava tubes connected to extinct volcanoes. The system had remained sealed for centuries, until the ranchers disturbed it. Now, it wouldn't stop pumps were installed, but the water kept flowing. Concrete barricades crumbled as the underground pressure forced its way to the surface. At night, Strange lights shimmered beneath the water's surface, as if something was glowing beneath the waves. A diver sent to investigate never returned. His tether snapped as if sliced cleanly, and his last transmission was a garbled mess of static and panic. They never found his body. Local tribes grew uneasy. Elders whispered of a serpent god, a guardian of water and stone. Their ancestors had spoken of a time when the earth would reopen, and the sleeping ones would wake. Within 2 weeks, a new spring burst through the base of the old canyon wall. Water erupted from the sandstone like a geyser, carrying with it enormous chunks of carved obsidian and the remains of wooden beams lashed with fiber rope. One of the beams was carbon dated. It was over 900 years old. The ranch was changing. The flora around the flooded zone began to mutate. Plants sprouted with unusual speed and size. The tree that once sat dormant exploded into bloom in a single night, its blossoms an unnatural shade of violet. Strange insects, never before catalogued, flitted above the surface of the new lake, iridescent, silent, and unafraid of human presence. By the 3rd week, the water had created its own current, cutting a snaking path through the valley floor, washing away fences, gates, and memories. Where the main barn had stood now sat a shimmering inlet, its waters still and black, reflecting stars that didn't match the night sky. The ranchers were forced to retreat to the higher ground. Drones sent to map the flood zone vanished from the grid. One returned, battered and waterlogged, its footage corrupted save for a few seconds of clarity showing a staircase. A staircase submerged in darkness, carved with jaguar heads and feathered serpents, descending into what looked like an underground city. What they had uncovered was not a single structure, but the edge of a buried metropolis, an Aztec outpost, possibly a ritual site or sacred wellspring. And it was alive again. Geologists speculated that the recent tremors had shifted an ancient fault line, fracturing a natural seal and releasing the water held in underground chambers for centuries. But even that explanation failed to account for the design, the machinery, the deliberate construction of something so vast and hidden. The final blow came when the ranch's western plateau collapsed into a sinkhole a 1/4 mile wide. It swallowed trees, stones, and a small building in an instant. When the dust cleared, an amphitheater-shaped basin was revealed. Tiered, symmetrical, and covered in mosaic stonework bearing the visage of Tlaloc, the Aztec god of rain and water. The flooding wasn't a natural disaster. It was a reawakening as the sun set over the high desert. The surface of the new inland lake shimmered like obsidian glass. Beneath its surface, watchers stirred, figures preserved in time, armor fused with coral, eyes wide open, despite the weight of centuries. Lined Frog Ranch was no longer a ranch. It had become something older, something stranger. Beneath the cracked soil and red rock mesas, an ancient rhythm pulsed like a buried heartbeat. The air, brittle with desert heat, often carried a scent not of sagebrush or sand, but of wet stone and deep earth, unmistakably mineral, oddly misplaced in the dry Utah plateau. The signs had been ignored for years. Machines malfunctioned without explanation. Drills refused to cut deeper. Compasses spun erratically. Small earthquakes sent subtle ripples across the surface, unnoticed by those who worked the land, but etched into the memory of the ground itself. Something old was shifting. Excavation teams had been focused on a metallic anomaly deep beneath the eastern portion of the ranch. Instruments had detected a hollow chamber far below the surface, its geometry too perfect to be natural. After months of cautious digging and rerouted shafts, the crew broke through. A cold burst of subterranean air emerged, sharp, ancient, and heavy with humidity. From the opening came a sound. Not the echo of empty space, but the low, ceaseless rumble of flowing water. Moments after breaching the chamber, the crew watched as water surged from the gap, not a slow seep, but a roaring gush, clear and ice-cold. It poured upward, as if the earth itself was exhaling. Within minutes, the entire lower shaft filled. Machinery was abandoned. Tunnels were sealed. Yet nothing could stop the rising flood. By the end of the first day, a quarter of Blind Frog Ranch lay submerged under 3 feet of strange glacial runoff. Water bubbled from natural vents, cracked fault lines, and long-sealed fissures. What startled even the geologists was its composition, high in volcanic minerals, but absent of any biological decay. It was as if it had been trapped for centuries, untouched by time. Soon, it became clear the flooding wasn't the result of groundwater or spring runoff. These waters came from below, not from one reservoir, but from a complex, interconnected system. Channels, cut stone conduits, and gate-like structures began to reveal themselves beneath the murky surface. Divers found narrow shafts shaped by human hands, flanked by stone carvings bearing serpents and glyphs too intricate to be of Ute or Navajo origin.